How's
Good
it going,
evening.
John?
Good. Thanks a lot for bringing me in here on this. I have a interesting parallel to the business I've been working on with my wife, but relating to microgreens. I had a coworker at work become very interested in it with me. He's bought some equipment. He's interested in doing that together with me, which I think is a great idea. I had a little bit of just awareness that doing partnerships is very important. I mean, I feel like you're kind of stuck with somebody for a while, but I also think that it would be a tremendous value for me for accountability and things like that to move forward with it. And we also have a very, very similar personality. Like Myers-Briggs, we're the same. So there's probably benefits and drawbacks to that.
Right.
So I was actually just looking for anything you guys might have as tips or suggestions or things to watch out for as far as going into partnerships.
This is something I love doing that not a lot of other people do. I want to hear from you all the things that you think would be positive and negative, and some of the things that you would do.
Yeah.
Because what I've found, and we do this with people that we've worked with, we've done this with people that we've coached. Most people have more information and knowledge than they realize. So I want to hear all the things from you because you know way more than we do about you and your business and your situation. I want to hear all the things that you would do, and then we will be a sounding board to say, yeah, nailed it. I totally agree. Or maybe I'll try this. And then we will definitely talk more about the experiences that we've had with partnerships. We've had all kinds of partnerships. Some have been great and some have been not so great. But what are all your thoughts on that? How do you see you guys potentially going forward in working together? What are some of the pitfalls or the good things you see? How would you go about setting this up?
I would think there need to be clearly defined roles as far as who does what, because I could envision a situation where one or the other person feels like, hey, I'm doing most of the work. Why am I getting only this amount when I feel like I'm doing more of the work? So I felt like expectations would be a really big deal for that. And I think one thing that I want to make sure is that I have it so that it truly does feel like teamwork. I feel like I would have a tendency to try to outcompete or outwork the other person, maybe because of my personality. So that was one idea that I had. And of course, there's all these fears, which I think are probably mostly not valid. Like they're like the fake fears that you guys talk about with just like, oh, what if this person ends up taking over the business? And I think that's probably just noise that I need to ignore. But I think having it structured right would be a big deal. I'm just not exactly sure how might be the best way to do that.
I love that. And I don't think those are fake fears. I think there's a difference between a fear and a legitimate concern that is important to address. So I don't think of those as fake fears at all. And you can tell the difference, right?
Mm,
Unless you're freaking out and there's no logical reason for that. We
mhm.
believe very strongly in if you have a concern, address that concern. There's just a difference between addressing it with your prefrontal cortex and thinking
Mm.
through how do we address this versus just freaking out, not taking action, not knowing why, being reactive, like I am with my kids sometimes.
You
they
and me both, man. I'm working on
If you figure it out, John.
uh,
it.
every day I think I'm making it happen. So,
Well, here's the thing
yeah,
too with
good.
fears is a lot of times as human beings, we have this side that we like to show everybody because it's something we're proud of. And then we have the shadow side. And the shadow side actually needs to be integrated with who you are to really be your most authentic self. And so a lot of times these fears come up and they come up, and we're like, no, we push them down and we're like, you don't exist. And we exile them, but they're in the subconscious kind of haunting us. And
Mm.
so if you can find someone in a business who you can go to and say, I have this fear, what if this person takes over my business? And you allow that shadow fear or that part of you that says, I want to talk about this and I need to express it. A lot of times when you just verbally say it, it's almost like the brain moves it from this subconscious fear and it puts it into your conscious mind. And then once it's in
Mm.
your conscious mind, it has to solve the problem. Sometimes it solves it just by saying it. I don't know how many conversations we've had where I just say it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, that's all I needed. I just needed to say it out loud. And then a lot of times the brain's so amazing because it has these different components it goes through, and it's like survival, emotional center, and then your higher functioning, your prefrontal cortex, higher thinking. And so when you take something that's just stirring in there, you say it out loud, it allows it to move to these different levels, process, become wisdom and knowledge, and then move back instead of this fear that just kind of haunts you. And so there's a fine line between complaining and letting it just rule you. And even though it sounds very complaining sometimes when you discuss things, but just let me express this fear. There's a part of me that's scared of this. There's a part of me that's bothered about this. Let me express it. Thank you. And now it's so crazy. Once you say it, all of a sudden you go, okay, I said it, but now I can actually solve this problem because I said it out loud. It's like it needs to come into existence for you to tackle it and then just move past it. And so sometimes they cycle for a while. And then sometimes it's just one time and you're just moving on. And so fears are an interesting thing.
That makes tons of sense, Tara. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little more. What do you envision some of you're absolutely right. Roles need to be clear. The best partnerships that we've had and the most clean cut are, for example, if someone brings money and then we're like, okay, based on the money you're bringing, you're going to either get this amount of equity in this project or this percentage of money. That's an easy partnership, right? 'Cause this is what you're going to get based on what you bring. With a straight up partnership where it's like, we're just going to go do this together, those can work as well. But those are a lot harder. And I think that's what you're talking about, where you and someone else are going to say, we each own, let's call it half of this company or whatever percentage that it is. What do you envision the different roles? Is there money required? Are you both going to bring the same amount of money? Is one of you going to bring the money and one of you not bring the money and bring more time? What do you envision?
What I would see it as is it's not particularly capital intensive to start this area, but in terms of where he is in life, he would have more money than I. I felt like what's been very successful in the work we're doing at the company we both work for right now is I'm in a sales role. So I was envisioning myself doing more of that, and he would be handling more of the operations. He also has a larger space for this physical space. As funny as that sounds, that's a limiting factor for me.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I'm bringing enough value to it where I do feel like he has more resources than I do.
Okay.
And I don't think it's bound to fail because I do see that I've worked successfully with this gentleman for 2 years. I think a lot of what Tara is saying, I could probably just address these things with him too, and he'd just be like, oh yeah, let's figure that out. But ultimately, he would come with more resources than I would.
Awesome. I love it. I mean, here's the thing. If I'm an attorney, you're my client, right? So I'm advocating for you. So your partner is important to me, but I'm saying I love it because if you were saying I have all the money, I have all the resources, I'm going to be putting all the time, I would be very concerned because we've been in this experience more than once where we were the ones putting in the money, the resources, the time, and we're just like, yeah, let's all share equity. And then when push comes to shove, the guy that was supposed to be doing all the sales and marketing didn't do it. And he now owns a third of our company. And we're the ones that put in all the money. So it's essentially like, here's some free money.
Okay.
And it was like a nightmare. We went through a big legal battle on it. And we've had other little things like that. This was the biggest one. So the fact that it doesn't sound like you're going to be putting in a ton of money that this person isn't at least matching with you, that makes me feel really good about that. The fact that you have sales experience and you plan on selling, awesome. But it sounds like you're both very reasonable people. I think the obvious thing is if you go and try to sell the product or whatever it is that you're selling and you don't sell any, and you clearly can see, okay, I'm not really bringing any value. You try to bring value and you're not bringing value. Then you just say, hey, no harm, no foul. We tried. Because there's a risk to everything in life, right? But if the risk can be minimized and the potential upside is huge, which it sounds like it is,
I think so.
I think it'd be cool to try to figure out how you can make it work together. Because yes, the right partners together, the right people working together can do huge things, but it can also be disaster. But if you're not saying, hey, here's $1 million, I'm going to put this in, you get half of the company, just go sell the product. What we should have done, which we will always do in the future going forward, we should have said you will get equity in the company based on performance. So here's a vesting schedule. If your partner, for example, if he doesn't have concerns, then you don't need to bring up too many concerns. You can bring up the concerns that you have, but you just know in your mind, I'm gonna be honest with this guy and I just need to worry about myself. But you know, what I would do if I were the person with the money and the resources and I was going to have someone else do the selling, I would come up with a vesting schedule. And depending on the situation, partners are different, but I would either start by saying this said person can start out getting commission and or profit sharing. And then if after a certain amount of time, this is working out, that will vest to where you now own a part of the company. Because if someone puts up $100,000 in an office or resources or whatever, and then day one, he's like, hey, we're 50-50 partners. And I won't even use you as an example, but let's say there's a salesperson who 2 days later is like, yeah, this isn't really working out, but I still own half of your company. So now let's go sell it and I get 50,000. Obviously that doesn't make sense. That's an extreme example to prove the point. So yeah, I just think it's performance based And you can either address that with him, but since he's the one putting up the money, you can just know that you're going to be honest about that and you're going to do your best and not make it that big of a deal. Contracts are good. Obviously, a lot of times what we'll do at the beginning is we'll just write an email. It's like an agreement of understanding with the agreement that, hey, we're going to try this out. It depends. You can start with a project, or you can say, let's just try this for 90 days. And then not only just try it, but this is kind of like the plan for 90 days. But after 90 days, we'll have a lot more information. And then that way we can go and write a better contract or something like that. I mean, everything takes time, right? So if you're going to talk to an attorney and you're going to work through a contract, I like to go. I'm a go. We're goers. We like to go and do and figure things out as we go. We don't even have our official contract with our Millionaire University partners yet. Like Brian, he might be listening. It's like, yeah, where is that? But just the way they get compensated, everybody's happy and things are going well. And we've learned a lot more. If we would have tried to write the contract from day one, a lot has changed since then. So we'd be rewriting contracts every week, and that costs time, money, and things are rolling and they're good. And there was emails with details of agreements of how it's going to work out. But yeah, I would just make sure you're not ever giving anyone a bunch of equity in a company. Like if someone already started a company and they've done a ton of work, and then someone comes along and they're like, here's half of my company, and then that person doesn't perform, you're kind of out of luck. Or if you put up a bunch of money and they don't perform and they still have equity. That's what we did with the company that we had.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like ended up being hundreds of thousands of dollars invested into this thing. And we're like, okay, we're all partners. But the idea was this person was going to go out and market and sell the heck out of it. They didn't. But then they still had a third of the company because I was an idiot. So it's obvious, but it's not. So just things like that. Any other thoughts on partners?
It's interesting because there's the formal work that needs to be done, the contracts and the agreements. And then there's this kind of intuition. And sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off. And sometimes you're like, I can totally trust this person. We can communicate easily. It's going to be great. And then sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, you're way different than I thought. And so you don't know what you don't know. And so it's best to go in and try to be as smart as you can. And then sometimes the things that we bombed, that's some of the best education we've ever gotten.
Yeah.
So these experiences that we're like, oh, we did this and this, and now we're like, we will never do that again. We understand how this works. We have a lawyer that we like to work with, and he can put out a contract pretty easily, pretty quickly. It's not too expensive these days with some things. And it's just like, okay, we have these small structures that we have in place. And other times they're a little more fluid and natural because it's just a simple setup. There's not a whole lot going on with equity or profit share, all these different things. And so it just kind of depends on your situation.
Yeah. I would say, for example, our first partner, we started this satellite dish business. And I knew a guy from a couple of years before that was just amazing. So I went and sought him out and we partnered with them. And we're like, yeah, we're 50-50 partners essentially. And this guy didn't do hardly anything. We were putting up the money. We were doing most of the work. Tara and I, we were putting in more than full time. He was putting in part-time, sleeping in. Like he had changed. He was totally a different person. And at the end of the day, still don't regret it really because everything just worked out. We didn't make like millions of dollars anyway. That's where we ended up with debt and stuff. But we ended up with all the debt. Anyway, it's just kind of a mess. It should have been like, hey, let's work together for 6 months, a year, and then you'll be vested in based on performance. How many sales guys are you recruiting? Stuff like that. And then when we did real estate, we had partners, but it was mainly money type partners.
So it was a little more simple, a little more black and white, number based.
Yeah. Either people were paid big chunks of commissions. We had people that we'd buy and sell properties with, but then we had money partners. And it was like, okay, we'll either pay you a percentage based on the money you give us, or you'll get equity. It wasn't like us just getting in there and trying to figure out how everything was going to work, but we had an assistant that was amazing. And that was great. And then in the education business, House Flipping HQ, which is now 7-figure flipping, we had partners, but it was kind of like a project base. We started the company. So if we started with someone, once again, it might be like, hey, we're getting into this together. Neither one of us have anything at this point. It's not like I'm putting in a ton of money. It's not like I've built up an audience. It's not like I've proven a concept. Like those are all valuable things that you don't want to just give away. So if that's the case, it might make sense to like, okay, we're going to be 50-50 partners, but still, here's what we're going to do. And here's what'll happen if it doesn't work. But in the education business, we had already started it. But then it was like, okay, we need some help. And we wanted to bring on a high level person. We brought on our good friend, Andy McFarland. He had a ton of experience in real estate, but he didn't want to run the day-to-day operations of the business. He didn't want to do the marketing. He just wanted to help do the coaching. So I'm like, okay, for these programs that we do, you will get a percentage. I think we gave them like half. Like you do all the coaching
A profit share.
and you'll get half, but it wasn't equity. It was profit share. That was the partnership. So it wasn't like actual ownership. It was profit share. But that agreement lasted so long. And then there came a time where we're like, okay, we now have other coaches. We have more programs and other coaches and other things going on. So you're going to be less a part. The pie is now bigger, but you have less responsibilities. And this was based on what he wanted to do. And so it was like, how about we give you 10%, but we're also going to give these other people 10%. But once again, this was profit share, not equity. And then in our current partnership, we're the main ones who started Millionaire University. We're the ones that run the whole show. Our other partners have businesses of their own, but we compensate them less than what they're worth monetarily because we give them a little bit of stock, I guess, yeah, stock, a little bit of equity, but it's based on for every hour they put in, they can earn a little bit of stock. Almost like the different places, Home Depot or whatever, offer stock to the people that work with them. And we do look at them as partners because they help us create a ton of our content. They do so much for us. And then we have Michelle, who's our assistant. She's not a partner, but after working with us for about a year, if she's able to run the entire company, we have no problem giving her a little bit of equity as well. But once again, she'll earn that over time. And some of it might be vested based on different performances and different things like that. So I know this doesn't all pertain to you and your current situation, but we're just sharing all different situations. We personally will probably never just full on partner with someone like, let's go do 50-50, go make this happen. But there could be certain situations. In the software company we started, we had a partner that made the software and that made sense. The guy doing the sales and marketing would have made sense if he did the sales and marketing, but he didn't do it.
This is super helpful. Thank you. I hear you saying, don't be too afraid to just jump in and figure out how the partnership should look. I don't have to have it all defined up front, and that can take a lot of extra time that may be wasted.
Yeah.
But then I think I hear you saying, make sure that the compensation or the profit sharing, whatever it is, matches the level of investment and involvement in terms of work.
Yes.
Well
Yep.
said.
Okay.
Very well said. And if there ever needs to be vested, there can be vesting. But in your situation, once again, if you came on and you're like, I'm providing the money, I'm providing the resources, I'm providing all these things, I would say make sure that you are the sole owner until this person earns their equity. But in your situation, it's kind of flipped, but I could tell, I've heard from you, you're very intelligent. I could tell you're very responsible. If you're worried about yourself taking advantage of someone, then you can be a little more like, we got to have this all written up. But it's just the way it is in business. I know I don't ever want to take advantage of someone. Kara doesn't want to. So as long as you know that your own integrity is intact, you can move forward. If you're needing to convince someone, then you can use these things to say, let me prove it to you. I will invest. At the beginning, you don't have to give me anything, or maybe there's some compensation depending on the situation, but I will earn my equity, right? But in this situation, it sounds like he wants to work with you. Based on what I'm hearing, I'll be like, let's go. No need to cause any hurdles that don't sound like they're there.
Okay. Cool. Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.